Hey friends, this is Daniel. I know we've kind of ghosted you the last couple of weeks, but please know that that wasn't our intention. Bryce had some personal stuff happen just before New Year's that's required his full attention. He and Katie are okay, thankfully, but if we learned anything from The Haunting of Hill House, it's that sometimes you just need to be there for family, and so that's what they've been doing. Please send all your good vibes their way. On a lighter note, though, over the past couple of weeks, I've been catching up with some friends of the podcast who you haven't heard from in a while. In preparation for our episode reviewing the movie Bird Box this Thursday, I've done some interviews with other people who have watched it. I wanted to get some outside perspectives because this movie is super popular right now. This, however, is not a spoiler-free discussion at all. So, if you're like the one person that hasn't seen Bird Box yet, now would be a good time to turn off this episode. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back to our normal every Thursday schedule starting this week. Hope your 2019 is off to a good start, and thanks for listening.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
Okay, so from this point forward, anything you say is being recorded and can be used against you in an HR hearing. Yeah, that too. Yeah, I also have lots of powers for editing, so just even be careful about what words you choose to use total. But we'll see where it goes.
I do not give my consent.
And that was the last we heard from Russell. But yeah. All right, so we are doing some special interviews leading up to our episode about Bird Box, and we are talking to what I like to think of as friends of the podcast. It's people that we've interviewed in the past that we haven't talked to in a while, and it's kind of exciting. And I feel like Bird Box is something that everybody's talking about and most people have seen. And as someone who I consider to be a fan of horror movies, really good horror movies, and also someone who's just a fan of movies in general, I thought it was only appropriate to bring on my good friend and Bryce's arch nemesis, Russell.
Howdy, folks. Glad to be a third alternate, last on the list for the guy who picked up his phone when everybody else didn't. No.
Yeah,
it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. There's a lot to be said for availability. But yeah, I do very much appreciate you taking the time to do this out of your busy schedule. And I want to start off talking about, not necessarily in the sense of horror movies or scariness or anything like that, but just what was your overall impression of Bird Box?
It had me very intrigued, mostly because of the way they marketed the film.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say Netflix put a lot of money around trying to hype it up, and I did my best to not watch any extended trailers, so I kind of went into it pretty blind.
Yeah,
but
fitting.
Yeah, not wearing a blindfold, but. Yeah. Overall, I was very intrigued by the at least the A-list actress that signed on, and I've watched several other things that have considered to be okay that Sandra Bullock's been in, and I wasn't sure, even just based on the very limited segment of trailer that I watched, whether it was a true horror film or if it was actually more of a sort of like a mystery or thriller type of movie.
Yeah.
But my wife and kids were out of town just for the extended holiday, so I had what I would call extra time on my hands, and so I found myself searching the Netflix queue, and it popped up. So I did give it a shot. I watched it by myself in the house without any distractions, which I think was good. Overall, I mean, the story, what I really liked about it, this will have to be edited since I've kind of bounced around a little bit. But
no worries.
What I really liked about the storytelling is kind of the flashback and flash forward approach. Stuff like that I think has a way of making a mediocre story somewhat interesting. I think that what happens is you're kind of forced to be interested in, what caused the angst to be built up with, the things that the cast is going through. And so at least catching your attention enough to kind of pause and really look into the flashbacks themselves. And I thought they did a really nice job of just giving you little bits and pieces along the way. I think it's one of Tarantino's films. Is it Pulp Fiction that does a nice job of kind of doing the flashbacks like that? And so from a movie perspective, I was a fan of that. Overall, super quick summary. I thought it's fine for what it is. It's essentially a direct to DVD release, right? So
yeah.
I mean, the investment is not paying $15 for a movie ticket, getting all gussied up, getting a babysitter for the kids, that kind of exercise. So I mean, it was kind of a quick, cheap film to watch. I think had it come out prior to me seeing A Quiet Place, I may have been more drawn in. I felt like A Quiet Place, unfortunately, Jim Halpert does a pretty fabulous job in that
exactly.
movie.
Yeah.
And I actually read that this story is based on a book.
Yes.
I'd be curious to go back and read it, but so I think having seen A Quiet Place before that, I really wasn't super drawn into the storyline itself.
So, in sort of that same vein, did you prefer A Quiet Place? Did you think it was a better movie?
1,000%, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I kind of did too. And it's surprising because most people that I've talked to have said, yeah, Bird Box was good, but it was like a less good version of A Quiet Place. And so it's interesting. And I'm curious too, because at first I thought, well, obviously this is just a ripoff of A Quiet Place, but since it was based on a book, it was, being made off of a story, and it may have even come out, it may have started production before A Quiet Place came out, but the similarities are pretty apparent. But that said, I think when Bryce and I talked about A Quiet Place, we never really considered it to be a super scary movie. It also fell into more of that mystery thriller type feel. There were definitely some scenes that were pretty, had you on the edge of your seat, but it wasn't quite the same sense of danger that you would have with like a Friday the 13th or The Strangers or something like that. So
right.
I feel like this one sort of fell into that as well. But were there any particular parts of this movie that you thought were appealing on a horror level?
I won't say appealing on a horror level, but in terms of grabbing my full attention and having me sort of on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
I think you and I talked a little bit on Hangouts the other day about there's a scene where they're in the water, and Sandra Bullock has got the kids in the boat and they're all blindfolded, and there's a guy that's calling out, hey, you're safe, basically, take off your blindfold. And that point in the story, you're not really sure, A, is the guy real, B, is this even Sandra Bullock's like imagination, or is it something like crazy supernatural? Like I wasn't sure what fork in the road the movie was going to take at that point. And that was one gripping scene that I found pretty super interesting, actually. Of course, if you watch the movie, it turns out that that's kind of the first instance where you find out that, well, some people are affected by this force, and then other people and are allowed to sort of keep their minds, other than the fact that their sole purpose in life, I guess, is to try to have other people look at the light or whatever. But unfortunately, it kind of takes that fork in the road where it reveals that some people are able to see it and not go completely crazy, but it doesn't explain anything about why that is, or what is it about those people that if nothing else, it popped open some questions that I was really interested to see how the movie answered them, and it never did. So.
Yeah. Well, and I thought that was kind of important because to add that additional element of danger and mystery to it, and by doing it kind of early on, then that makes you, kind of like you were saying, the format draws you in. It kind of makes you pay more attention because now you've got yet another mystery that you're searching for answers for, in addition to just the creatures or the demons or whatever they were. So, yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you about too, and that scene kind of goes into it as well. Do you feel like you relate to movies any differently as a parent? Like, do movies about a parent trying to save their kids or being in a position where their kids are in danger, does that affect you more than it used to? Or
it does, and it's weird, especially movies that show kind of whatever malevolent force is attacking kids. I mean, I think it's impossible to be a parent and not try to draw parallels with your own kids. And I don't even know what happens with the birth of a child and why. I mean, all of a sudden, it's like you have this crazy bond with this human life that didn't exist before. But it absolutely does, and it makes you think. It really draws you in more than even the zombie movies, where you're like, here's how I would do this and what I would do. And I mean, with kids, it's like, holy shit, man! There's so much more that goes into being prepared and being kind of cool, calm, and collected for them, and all the grocery carts of stuff that come with them. I mean, imagine trying to outrun this stuff, and I've got to have. I mean, I wouldn't be able to get in a canoe and paddle our way out with like a teddy bear for one child. It's like I got to drive away in a Suburban full of crap,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to pack the stroller and the playpen, and exactly. Plenty of snacks so that no one gets angry, and for sure.
Oh, and then what happens when they got to go to the bathroom? So,
it'd be really hard changing those diapers with your eyes closed, but
exactly.
Well, that's cool. And I was just kind of curious, if that element like hit home a little more, because it's something that I definitely am keyed into, that's like a key struggle in the movie, but at the same time, it's not one that I have like that personal experience to empathize with. And I really feel like for a lot of people, that was kind of a big element of what drew them into the movie as well.
Along those same lines, I thought it was so weird, and I still, I guess, I think they tried to explain it at the end, but it didn't really land home with me. But the way Sandra Bullock names the kids boy and girl, like to basically not, if I don't give them names, then I'm not drawn in to develop this deep intimacy love with them. It's they're almost like we're all in survival mode here, and therefore you're just man and boy and girl, and I thought that was so stupid.
Yeah. It seemed like there was definitely kind of a sub-theme of the story where she was wanting to keep everyone at arm's length after being hurt by her husband or boyfriend or whatever it was leaving. And then over the course of the movie, that kind of broke down. But I felt like that was one of the least interesting storylines of everything that was going on. Right. And that was almost added on to it. And I felt like that's really what the ending focused on, when I would have much rather the ending focused on explaining what those things were and them finding like a way to defeat them, or anything that would have given them hope for like a larger or more to have room to expand the story. Whereas I felt like it was just a nice kind of clean cut Hollywood ending, not really setting it up for additional storytelling.
Well, I mean, Bird Box too. I mean, think about it. It's like being in the blind house. I mean, when you're, there's not going to be a lot to do there. And I don't know if you've ever been around. I mean, we used to live in Bartlesville, right? And you'd, in between those buildings, I mean, what did the ground look like with all the birds flying overhead?
Oh, it was disgusting. Yeah.
It was covered in bird crap everywhere you would walk.
And you could smell it from blocks away.
Exactly. And all I can think about is them running around and playing. I was like, no, man, that's completely. That was the fakest thing in the movie. It's not showing them getting just rained down on.
They should have been carrying umbrellas.
Exactly. At least umbrella hats.
Yeah, right. Because blind people wouldn't know how ridiculous those looked. So
yeah,
would have been a perfect match. Oh, yeah. Well, was there anything that the movie did that particularly annoyed you other than that last scene not being fecally accurate?
Just not really fully explaining, the Force itself, or, where it came from, how to defeat it, kind of a lot of the particular endings that they could have gone into, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I think Cloverfield, the trilogy itself, did a similar thing, but the way they approached it was, towards the end, they kind of showed, just like the last scene in a couple of those movies was like, here's us going to fight, or I noticed some parallels from that. But that kind of annoyed me. Is like, what is it? Why is it that it causes some people to be suicidal and other people to just? It seems like if you have immunity from it, where you can exist and hang out outside and just walk around, you're still affected by it because you're just trying to go around and get other people, to look at it. Yeah. And like, how do you even meet up with other people that aren't? How do you know those people are? I don't know. Yeah. It's just like the whole gang of them that showed up in the cabin in that one scene where they were searching the house for supplies, and there turns out there was like 6 or 7 of them outside with that hadn't been affected by the Force, and they were trying to get them to open their eyes. I was like, how do those people find each other? Right. In every other scene of the movie, there's only one dude that happens to be immune to this or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, was there a user group that was posted at a meetup somewhere? And I don't know.
They had their own subreddit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and overall, like, I thought it was a very, like, quality movie. It was really well made from just the production and filming and soundtrack and everything else. Like, they did a good job on that. I thought the acting was surprisingly good for a movie that sort of had that much horror sci-fi in it. Because, a lot of the movies we watch, we're not quite accustomed to that. But I do feel like it kind of fell short on a couple of levels. And I feel like a lot of the focus was maybe on Sandra Bullock and her kids and like her relationship with the other people in the house, and less focused on what I found interesting about the movie as a horror fan, which was, this unseen force that was causing problems and spreading and unexplainable. So,
well, it's kind of like they had, let's say hypothetically they had $1 million budget to pay actors and actresses. Mm-hmm. They probably spent $975 on Sandra Bullock, and so it's, how do we figure out how to pay the extras and pizza and Cheez-Its, and all it allows for is maybe some shaking of trash cans outside of the camera views, the actual monster itself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, between Sandra Bullock and John Malkovich and
that's right,
the guy who was in Get Out, whose name I can't ever remember. It's like, it's kind of like when I don't know if you've ever played like daily fantasy football, where you create like the optimal lineup based on your salary cap, and one option is to buy like the 3 most expensive guys and then just get nobodies for the rest of it. Like, that's kind of what this movie did, but it kind of worked out. So but overall enjoyed it. Appreciate you taking time to talk to me about it, and I will give you one final chance to deliver any message that you would like to Bryce while he's not here to respond.
In other circumstances, I would gladly roast him like the bridge troll that he is. But I wish him the best. I know this is a tough time for him and his wife, and I just want to say I love you, buddy. In the most in the way that I wouldn't strike someone with my car kind of love. Hope things get settled down and life gets back to normal for you.
So that was very nice, but I just wanted to clarify. When you say not strike him with a car, if he was in the lane, would you change lanes? Or are you saying you wouldn't change lanes to hit him?
Did he signal first or did he not? That's very important to this scenario. If he didn't signal, it's not looking good.
What if he was on a scooter?
one of those rent-a-scooters?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a bloodbath.
And it'd be scarier than Bird Box.
Exactly.
Awesome.
You better wear a blindfold to watch that go down.
All right. Thank you very much. Say hello to the kids and Cassie for me.
You got it, man. Have a good one, Daniel.
All right. I appreciate it. Bye.
All right, bye.
Okay, so we are doing a round of interviews with friends of the podcast, people that we've talked to before that maybe we haven't talked to in a while, about the new movie Bird Box that's on Netflix and apparently coming to some theaters soon. And I'm really, in these kind of one-off interviews, I've been trying to get a feel for how people that aren't necessarily fans of horror movies, or maybe just people that watch movies differently than Bryce and I do in general, feel about this movie, because it's super popular right now. And there are advertisements everywhere. People are talking about it. It's got a huge internet footprint. And so I'm just really curious to hear kind of the different takes and viewpoints on it. And so for this interview, we are inviting back our really good friend who the audience hasn't heard from in a while, Trey.
Yes, hello. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Got a solid 5-hour nap in before this.
Nice. So you
immediately followed it with drinking caffeine, so I'm amped up.
Excellent. I like it. I appreciate your preparation. That is definitely more than any guest that we've had before has put into getting ready for this. So hats off to you, sir.
That's that's what I'm all about. Sleeping and caffeine.
Yeah, the opposite sides of life. So yeah, we had talked to you previously about the movie Would You Rather, and one reason I wanted to talk to you about that one is because I know that you're not generally a fan of horror movies or scary movies in general, but you like movies that are interesting thought experiments. And after we had seen each other at Jake's graduation, you had messaged me and asked if I'd seen Bird Box yet, which I assumed meant that you probably have some strong opinions on it, and I am just wildly excited to hear what those are.
Yes, I have a couple.
Okay.
See, the thing is, whenever I watched it, I didn't even know about the hype around it yet.
Yeah.
Because I was out on vacation, and my family just started playing it. So I also did not see the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Whenever I first saw it.
Yeah.
And went back and watched it. But it kind of changed the tone of the movie, because I started where they're just in the house.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like after kind of the outbreak has started and the survivors are there in the house together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I didn't get any of the setup. Mm-hmm. The only thing I knew is that there's a pregnant lady.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to leave the house. Yeah. And, you can't look outside. So it didn't seem too different from like normal life. I mean, that's already what we do anyway. I mean, I'm not pregnant, but
yeah, it's like anyone with social anxiety or under the age of 30. This is just how you live.
Yeah, that's just normal.
A bunch of weird roommates and
none of them get along. That's normal too.
Yeah,
there's a couple crazy ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really solid. I always enjoy in a movie where they focus on the survival and setup aspects of it.
Yeah. Like
where they're there for a few days and their main concern is food instead of explaining what the demons are or whatever it is outside.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really matter if you're trapped in the house and you can't leave. You're just going to run out of food in a few days, especially whenever you keep letting people into your home.
Exactly. Well, and it did kind of that weird thing where I felt like it jumped forward in time without necessarily saying that it was doing that. And so you think there are like 4 people there, and then there are like 8 people, and then there's like a whole village living in this one house. So, yeah, that definitely would power through anybody's food supply pretty quickly.
Exactly. Also, because I missed the first 15 minutes, I didn't know that this was one of those movies that jumped around in time.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what sets it up. It starts at the very beginning, and there's like, okay, 5 years ago, 15 minutes in the future, 10 seconds ago, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was not ready for that at all. Like, I thought they had just made a crazy decision to just jump around once.
Immediately to a boat and children who are blindfolded.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is an insane budget cut. Like, they're really smart.
Yeah, we lost some scenes there, but whatever.
They decided the more people they let into the house, they weren't really worried about how the survival aspect would work. They just didn't want to pay any of them.
Exactly.
Don't even want to do a death scene. Just get rid of
Yeah, just write them right out of the script.
Yeah. Which is excellent writing, I think.
Yeah.
I enjoy time skipping. It really cuts down on a lot of unnecessary stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it also keeps you a little bit more engaged because it's really easy, for me at least, to get distracted by my phone during movies. But if I'm having to pay attention and like figure out where are they and what are they doing, that draws me in a little bit more. And I think it's also an interesting way of telling the story just because it's never giving it to you all at once. Like you kind of see a start point and an end point, and then it slowly fills in what happens between. So you are just constantly getting more ammunition to like speculate.
Right. It feels a lot less spoon-fed.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. Also, you were talking about how engaging it was. This is probably one of the more engaging movies I've seen recently. The best point I have for that would be I had a drink with me, and I had finished it, and I did not get up to get another one.
Wow.
Yeah, so like it takes some special storytelling.
That might be the highest praise for a movie I've ever heard.
And I mean, let me tell you, the fridge was literally 15 feet away from me, and I was not going to get up and miss any of it because even the conversations seemed meaningful, and that doesn't seem to happen that often in movies anymore. You just kind of put some lens flares on, and then everybody's happy. Add a few explosions.
Yeah, and then some Michael Bay sound effects, and you're good to go.
Yeah, they don't even record him anymore. They just have a stash of them put away.
just like a dashboard where you just push a button and it makes an explosion or a transformer transforming sound, and boom, you got yourself a movie.
Plus, especially since no one's seen any of the Once Past the Second one, so
that's true.
Have to worry about it.
Yeah,
they can just cycle all the sounds.
It's probably just clips from previous movies smashed together.
Yeah, but speaking of the best movies of all time, Bird Box. I really liked it, but I Googled it so that I could be informed. Did you know that it is only 62% on Rotten Tomatoes and 52% on Metacritic?
Oh wow, no.
Yeah, but it has so much hype.
Yeah,
and I go onto Netflix to watch those first 15 minutes, and it said that I have a 99% match to it. So either I have horrible taste in movies, or Netflix is trying to do something a little sneaky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's Netflix original content. Of course you have a 99% match.
Oh, it's Netflix?
Yeah. Well, the critics probably all had a 99% match, too, and that's why they were disappointed.
Yeah. So you want to talk about the parts that we liked more first, or the parts that we didn't like more first? Or do you have anything that you didn't like in it?
So before we get into that, I did have one question for you that I wanted to kind of start from, and then we can go from there. Okay. Did you find this movie scary at all?
Okay, you have to remember, first time I saw it, didn't see the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But no, I wasn't really scared ever. I think the scariest part to me was the old lady. Something about her being freaked out.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of freaky.
Yeah.
I was watching one scene where she like covered her eyes with her little old lady hands.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe partially it's because it looked like the what's it called? The Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. Or, maybe it's just like the idea of a person that's older being scared of something.
It's like they have more life experience, so they know when it's worth it to be scared.
Yeah, maybe. Like, I mean, they're supposed to have seen a lot more, and she's like huddling over in the corner, covering up her eyes. I don't know. That's kind of just maybe more creepy than scary to me, even.
Yeah,
it's very creepy.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was really suspenseful, but I didn't feel the same sense of like ever being like truly unnerved by it. I didn't, leave the light on when I went to bed or anything. It wasn't one of those like deeply psychological disturbing movies, and that part of that is probably because it had a happy ending. But it seemed like the focus was definitely a lot more on the characters and the individuals, because, like you said, there wasn't really a lot of development of trying to explain what the monsters were, which I agree that I kind of prefer that, but it's a little different than like a zombie movie where you have this sense of like impending doom where they're getting closer and closer. And yeah, I kind of felt like in format it was very similar to a zombie movie, but for some reason it didn't have the same sense of danger.
Yeah, I guess I agree with the zombie thing, especially since they're holed up.
Yeah.
And like, it wouldn't really have changed anything if it was zombies outside, because you also can't go outside.
Mm-hmm.
You also can't let other people in. Your main concern is food.
Yeah.
Which I thought the scene where they went to the grocery store was really cool.
Yeah.
Although it didn't make a ton of sense, because just previously they had found out that they can't trust technology.
Right.
And then immediately afterwards, like a few minutes later, they're like, okay, my car has cameras on it.
Yeah.
Let's just go do that.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a nice touch that they covered up the backup camera, just because I wouldn't have thought to put that into the movie. But yeah, in that whole, your GPS is accurate enough to get you from your garage to another place when you've got like crash planes in the road is
right. And
maybe a little bit of a stretch.
Bodies, and which they ran over one body. So, I mean,
yeah.
I guess they did check that box. Also, I think another thing that made this movie good in a way that a lot of horror movies, well, I don't even know if you would consider this horror, but movies like this are bad, is that the characters were not overly stupid the entire time.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, one of the guys immediately says, hey, let's cover up all the windows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 2 minutes into being in the home.
Yeah.
And that was really smart, and they were immediately going out, getting resources, immediately untrustful of everybody. Even though it made that one guy look like a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, what is his name? I know the actor's name.
Yeah, John Malkovich.
Yeah. Love that guy. But like they made him look bad, but realistically, that's the kind of character you need to be in a situation like that.
He definitely had that like survival mindset.
Yeah.
He had adjusted to the situation, whereas a lot of other people hadn't yet.
And he was right every single time.
Yeah.
I really like how they somehow made it to where you didn't like him, but also he was right every time.
Mm-hmm.
That's special to me.
Yeah. Yeah, so what are some other things that you liked about it?
Okay. Survival aspect was really good. I thought it was interesting how the whole time they set it up as, if you look at it, you're donezo, and then, but that in itself would kind of end the story pretty quickly, because you could just stay inside and you could figure something out.
Yeah.
But then they added in the element of, but actually, some people can look at it and be okay, and then turn into like religious, like trying to convert you over to see the light of these creatures. And I really like that, because I think that made it way better, because you could just close your eyes.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. Well, I definitely felt like the people in the movie were a lot scarier than the creature or the monster or whatever the things were.
Which is the biggest trope of all.
Yeah, right.
Like, the demon is bad. You know,
yeah.
Worse, the demon that you are.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Take a look inside.
Yeah, which I'm sure is, part of the message, but it just gets played out so many times. That first guy that they meet, though, that comes to the house.
Yeah.
Whew, that was I enjoyed that very much.
That was a very intense sequence from when he sort of turned. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they were not afraid to leave clues of what was happening the entire movie.
Yeah.
I think you kind of get thrown off whenever they jump through time, because if you were just watching the movie linear, then I think you have enough like spare brain power to kind of figure it out. But whenever you're jumping around, you lose some of that.
Yeah, I felt like everything seemed way more obvious the second time I watched it than it did the first time.
Yeah, that's just good storytelling. But yeah. You always got to leave those little hints. And I like the what is that, like a Lovecraftian throwback? Whenever he pulls out the drawings.
Oh, I don't know that. I'm not familiar with anything that was referencing, but I did think that was cool, that scene.
I thought it was. I'm pretty sure one of them looked like Cthulhu.
Yeah, I'd give you that.
Okay, so whenever he's just laying out those drawings while the pregnancy is conveniently happening both at once.
Yeah.
Because, again, they're just trying to save budget.
Exactly. You don't have the budget for 2 birthing scenes.
Baby scenes are expensive.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll cut it to where it only shows their faces while they're screaming and 2 fake babies, because you can't use real ones.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm assuming they saved at least like $15, $20 on that scene.
Well, and now I'm thinking that like every shot from the camera like behind the blindfold was probably just the same shot.
Yeah.
You've got me thinking about this whole movie in a totally different way.
Because the thing is, like, if the whole point is that you're losing a sense, like The Quiet Place, also love that one so much. And also, double side note, I don't think Bird Box would be as popular without Quiet Place
agree.
first.
Yeah.
It definitely set up this. I don't know if it's going to be a subgenre of losing a sense or something.
Yeah.
But I kind of hope so. I like it.
Yeah, Sarah has speculated that the next big blockbuster movie will be one about monsters with a heightened sense of smell. So you have to bathe regularly and not pass gas.
And what they're going to do is they're going to show that in middle schools. And it's going to be used as a mixed class. You've heard of classical. Now, just scare your kids.
Yeah.
Just like in this movie, where at the very beginning, she says that she's going to beat her kids if they take off their blindfolds.
Yeah.
That's excellent parenting. Like, you got to let them know.
You're really being the John Malkovich of parents.
Well, I mean, I think after 5 years of seeing people go insane and stab themselves with scissors, I think it's okay to start yelling at your kids at that point.
Yeah. For sure. Was there anything about this movie that you didn't like?
The ending. I think it sucked.
It was a little convenient.
Yeah, like, and it was the same thing in Quiet Place, except in The Quiet Place, the character who does really well is the one that can't hear, and so she's more quiet, I guess. Except that's not like her only way that she wins. It's mainly the device that she has in her ear, the cochlear implant.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel that cheap to me, and especially since the entire film he was working to fix it. Yeah. So it made sense in the movie. But then you come to this one, and the entire way that this little community wins is that they're blind. Which, okay. Second off, how is it an only blind community? And are they getting help?
Where are they getting food? That was my biggest question.
Yeah, like, so I can understand like them surviving really well at the very beginning.
Yes.
And then a week later, they would have no water, no food. Like, they also cannot see. It's not like they have special powers to where they can sense the world around them.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe like heightened hearing or something, but
heightened sense of smell.
Yeah, they live in the jungle with all their birds.
Yeah.
Like, it's the blind community that's like also a club for bird watching.
Yeah, exactly.
But instead of just watching, they kidnap all the birds and put them inside their little hut.
Yeah.
And
like, that had a very, very low probability of being the answer for how do you survive the apocalypse, but God bless them.
Yeah. Well, especially because remember, that's 5 years later.
Yeah.
And they're not just living, dude. They're a thriving community.
Very true. Yeah. They
get there. They don't show any food. I don't know what they're farming. I don't know how you farm without saying. I don't farm myself, so maybe it's easy.
I also don't know where you farm indoors, but yeah.
Exactly, because they can't go outside, can they?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe the blind ones could, but still getting in and out, and then they'd still have to worry about the people. So I don't know.
It's true, but remember, whenever she had the blindfold on, she would still get really disoriented whenever the thing came.
True.
Because
Yeah.
it talk
Mhm.
for some reason. Also,
Yeah.
they just kind of threw that one in like a few times, which
Yeah.
I guess I'll make another complaint about. At least make your monster consistent.
hmm
Um,
Yeah, I think that was kind of like my biggest complaint with the movie, and I don't want to give away too much because Bryce and I are still going to record the full episode on it, but just the idea that I feel like it annoys me a lot when a movie doesn't obey its own rules. And I felt like this movie was obviously very well written, had great acting, was really well produced, the camera work and everything was great. But there was just a lot of stuff that didn't really make sense. And I think it stood out to me a lot more the second time I watched it. But it's just, there were so many things that felt really inconsistent, or it was like a really good, really intense scene. But if you are, say, watching the movie and taking notes about it to talk about in a podcast, you're like, what I just wrote makes no sense.
none at all.
Yeah. But that said, it was still an engaging watch. It still definitely kept my attention both times. And it had it did a lot of things very well. But I also would say that I didn't find it particularly scary, even though there were some scenes that I would consider like good horror scenes.
Right. What was your favorite good horror scene then?
So one that I thought was just really well executed is when they were in the grocery store, and then they start hearing that voice like from the door in the back, and they decide to let him in, and they're really kind of on the fence about whether or not to do it. But then I can't remember the character's name, but the one who works there says, "Oh yeah, I know him. He was kind of crazy, but he was always nice enough to me." They start to let him in. He freaks out and goes crazy. The guy runs and pushes him back, and they shut the door. And, the way that the music and everything is building up and the intensity, and it's just taking this step from going from feeling super relieved and like they're safe and like they found all this food so they're going to be able to survive, to this intense scene of danger. And then they shut the door, and then like the pool of his blood starts coming in under the door. Like that, I just thought was a really like well executed, intense horror scene.
And then to top it all off, he immediately starts banging on the door again.
Yeah. Like,
I think
not even phased by it.
That scene.
Yeah.
It's because it is like the perfect trap.
Yes.
But only if you're dumb enough to do it again, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
The movie just ends with them one at a time opening the door.
Yeah.
And then, no, I'll sacrifice myself.
Yeah.
Runs in, door shuts.
In the end, it's just John Malkovich streaking alone in the grocery store, which is probably how things really would go in an apocalyptic scenario.
True, just drink yourself to death. I mean,
at the grocery store.
At the grocery store, hanging out at the grocery store.
/ pet store, apparently.
Except, since the crazy people can walk around with their eyes open,
Yeah.
I feel like they would check out that grocery store pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing that you didn't really see happen that you would have in a zombie movie, is there wasn't like the swarming as soon as you're discovered. But
I guess it's because you don't really need that in this kind of movie.
Agreed.
Because you only really have one objective as the baddie,
Yeah.
is to make them use their eyes in any way. And then the problem takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Like with a zombie, you could have one zombie kill one person, but then there might be the one person who's really good at killing zombies and can take out 100 on his own. But that's not the case in this one. It's a one-shot KO every time on every person, except the other one time in the movie where they don't follow this rule. And the guy, it's where they're at the secondary house. What is that one man's name? Tom.
Yes.
He has the gun, sees the thing, is about to shoot himself, and then says, "Nope, plot hole."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And then kills himself.
He's like, "No, my feelings for this woman, my mother's age, are so strong that I'm going to power through this real quick."
You could not discriminate like that. But yeah, I mean, it was a really I mean, I love and hate that scene because the part of me that's like thinking is like, wow, that's really stupid.
Yeah.
But then the other part of me, you get that, oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's exactly the key to the whole movie is the, oh, yes, part of you really liked this movie. I want to think through all of the plot points of this movie might have been a little less excited about it.
Like the people at Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic.
Exactly, yeah.
It is literally their career.
Yeah, right.
To break down a movie and tell you how horrible it is.
Mm-hmm.
But, gosh, it's just so good. And a movie like this, you don't have to show that much.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely did a lot of like building that suspense and creating that urgency without ever having to show you a monster or like a bunch of computer generated creatures or anything like that.
Right, a bunch of nonsense. Okay. Yeah. I did think of another thing that I disliked though.
Okay.
Just looking at the picture on Bing, whenever they're on the river and they're going down, the whole time, even at the very beginning, he's like, "Don't bring kids. It's ridiculous." Mm-hmm. And then it keeps reiterating that, and then they have the conversation not once but twice about who's going to get up and look.
Yeah,
and it's that I think is a really great build-up because it's like you're seeing it from her side of it's not her kid.
Yeah,
is she going to let them die for it? Is she going to sacrifice herself to save a kid that's not hers?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this really, I think, emotional part of the movie. And then the climax for that is she's like, "No, we'll be fine."
Yeah.
And completely ignores all the warnings. And then it's completely fine. Like they fall out, I think.
Yeah.
But then are immediately safe. And I feel like this movie is really good about setting up problems and then really bad about immediately solving them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's one thing, too, that I feel like in a horror movie, things would just continue to get worse. But I feel like with this one, once a problem was done, it was just kind of done.
Exactly, because, like, you don't need to go on the river again. They have food, and in the food situation, they found a fully stocked grocery store because they're the only people in the entire movie that lived around that area.
Naturally.
That survived. They seemed like they were smart, yes, except for a couple of them. But other than that, they were very, very lucky.
Yeah,
the entire movie. And I think luck in a movie kind of makes it feel cheap. You can have I think maximum one lucky character, because then you can relate to that. Everybody's got the person that they see that always seems to be super lucky, and it works out. But then you have the full home of people that just it's worked out perfectly.
Yeah, just rolling nat 20s all day.
Yeah, nat 20s all day, baby. And then what was another bad part? I feel like now I'm just trying to trash on the movie that I said.
Well, but I think that in general, even though you totally acknowledge that there were things that didn't make sense or that were maybe not the best choice writing wise, but you still have a positive impression of the movie overall. Right,
and so sneaky of Netflix to get that on me.
Yeah.
I'm about to rewatch it and only take notes of whenever I dislike something, and anytime I smile or too engaged, I'm going to look away from the screen for a little bit.
Well, anytime you smile or are too engaged, you'll get up and walk to that refrigerator.
Yeah, I'll grab another drink.
Yeah.
Just leave it open this time.
Yeah.
And, let the alluring scent of alcohol bring you back over.
And just get drunk mad.
Drunk mad and mad drunk.
Yeah. Well, cool. Do you have any final thoughts on it?
Let's see.
Well, I guess maybe a way to wrap it up would be, would you recommend this movie to other people in general, and is there anyone you wouldn't recommend it to?
I would say yes, I recommend it to pretty much everybody. It's good. It's solid. It's engaging the entire time. if you like something like A Quiet Place, you're gonna like this. You're already caught in the trap.
Yeah, you've been primed.
Yeah, you're primed for it. Quiet Place was better, but that's a different thing. I wouldn't recommend it to blind people. I don't think you're going to find it as interesting, and it panders you a little bit at the end.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And I don't know, it wasn't scary enough to not recommend to people that don't like horror, and it's not so suspenseful that anybody can't watch it. All around, solid movie. 62% on Rotten Tomatoes.
99% in your heart.
Yeah, 99 in my heart, according to Netflix.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. I know that this is actually past your general bedtime, so we appreciate the sacrifice. And yeah, and hopefully we'll get you back on here in the fairly near future and won't go like 3 seasons in between next time.
Yeah, it was fun, especially whenever I knew what to do this time.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, I say a marginal difference.
Yeah, cool. Oh, and one final thing on my side. I've actually been blindfolded this entire interview, and I bet you couldn't even tell. So take back your comments about people who are blind not being able to farm.
Are you also farming?
Not yet. What do you think I'm doing after this? So, Sarah.
Yes.
How are you?
Tired.
So this evening we watched Bird Box.
Again?
For the second time. Because originally we watched it with your family at Christmas. Yep. And that was maybe 2 weeks ago. And I would say that in those 2 weeks, I have probably heard about Bird Box in an advertisement or from another person at least once per day.
Yes, I have as well. It seems like it's something people are watching.
Yes, it seems very popular right
Yes.
now. And I know that you are not particularly a fan of horror movies, but because of this podcast that Bryce and I do, you've ended up watching a lot of them over the last couple of years. And so I wanted to start off by asking, did you consider this to be a horror movie, or did you find it scary?
So when we first watched it, I don't think I knew that it was a scary movie, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you warned me that it was a scary movie. I don't think so.
I think your sister just chose it and chose not to tell you that.
Well, I didn't think this movie was scary at all.
Not at all.
No, I'm not really scared of wind.
What about,
Like, the monster was leaves.
yeah. Well, what about the crazy people though?
No, I wasn't really scared of them either. But I feel like you might think this was a scary movie because you think, like, losing your mind is the most scary thing.
Yeah. I don't... Yeah, that element didn't really make it super scary for me in this one, like in the way that, like, Shutter Island did or something.
Mm-hmm.
This, I felt like, was more...
Lame?
It just didn't... I mean, it definitely had some intense moments, and there was, like, some violence, and there was some supernatural stuff going on, but I think I'm with you on the idea that, to me, it didn't... I never really felt scared or in danger. I mean, there were maybe a couple of scenes, like with the little girl, where she was off on her own, and then the wind picked up, and then, like, the hair was standing up on her head. But I also kind of feel like after a while, you kind of knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And it
I was
kind
just
of,
like, maybe you should just sit down for a while till the wind leaves.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, all that aside from it being scary or not scary, I think it was trying to be scary.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't really see this as a horror movie or a scary movie.
Well, do you see it as
More of an adventure movie?
I can see that. Do you see it as a
psychological thriller?
As a good movie?
No. The directing was okay. The colors were good. I liked the blue. They had a lot of blue in the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like her mask
Yeah.
and her outfit and the bluebirds.
Yeah. It definitely had kind of like a tint to it. Mm-hmm. It was like a very... Like the color seemed very deep, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I wish I would watched it thinking about that as well. Because, you know, like a single man, the mood changes when you see the color changes inside the scenes. And so I wish I would have thought about that the second time we watched it, but I won't watch it a third time.
So you said you didn't think it was a particularly good movie. Was there anything that really stood out to you as good or bad? And one reason I'm interested in asking is because I'm looking at it from the perspective of judging a horror movie. And we've kind of established that it wasn't really scary, but I think it did a lot of things to kind of keep the suspense up. But for someone who's coming at it as more of a fan of just movies in general, what led you to the decision that you didn't care for it?
Well, it kept my interest throughout the whole movie, so it did that at least. But yeah, I didn't really care for the characters. I felt like Sandra Bullock at the very beginning when she was mean to her children. I was like, kind of makes sense. Sandra Bullock is probably mean. I felt like that was a very natural scene for her.
Well, if you gave birth to a child at the age of
54,
then you'd probably be a little grumpy too.
Yeah, I would. But, yeah, I just think it was kind of a worse version of Quiet Place. I thought Quiet Place was scary, in parts. And it was the same thing, except this was wind.
So you felt like the danger...
Well, it was
more accessible,
noise.
Maybe?
It was noise versus scene, and everything makes noise, which I feel like is way more tense than, not being able to see. I totally called the death shit at the very end. The death stuff at the very end. I called the death stuff at the end. Cut.
Of this movie?
Yeah.
Who was deaf in this movie?
I meant blind. I'm so tired.
You want to try that again?
So I totally called that at the end of the movie where there was blind people. I was like, that's who would survive. And I was right.
What's interesting...
I didn't say it, but I thought it.
What was interesting to me was that those blind people seemed to have worked their way into a sustainable food sourcing situation indoors. So that's impressive.
And I felt like they should have had walking sticks. I feel like they should have utilized that more in the movie. That would have made it a little bit more realistic.
But, if you're abandoned in the middle of the woods and you can just, hone in on a house and walk immediately to the front door every time, then why would you bother with a stick?
That's a fair point. I had some questions about it. Okay. Were pregnant people unfazed by the wind? Is the monster... Well, the next question is the monster the wind? Or is it supposed to be something else?
So I think the pregnant people were fazed by it. I think had either of them seen the monster...
It just so happened there was 2 pregnant people in a small group of people?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Which, it kind of makes sense a little bit that, people in general would have more sympathy or, make more space for or go out of their way to help a pregnant person.
Well, the reason I say that I think they were unfazed was because the time that the crazy person in the house decided to open the windows was after the babies were born, after they got cut, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, the pregnant people probably wouldn't be fazed by the monster.
So I took it, I don't know. It just seemed like that was the time when people kind of had their guard down. So he was able to get to the people one-on-one downstairs to sort of start that. And then he'd taken out the guys who were physically strong enough to fight him before he started it. But
maybe so.
Anyway. But no, to your other point, I don't think it was the wind. I do think that there was some kind of... Because the author, the guy who played Rod in Get Out, when he was talking about the ancient cultures and how they all had the demons, and the demons would manifest in a way that made you crazy, basically. It seemed like that was the angle it was going for, because then when you saw
the crazy guy's drawings, it kind of made you think like that's what he saw them as.
I know,
Maybe.
there was tons of different types of drawings, though.
Yeah.
The monster looked different, each one.
And-
Which I thought was interesting from the same perspective as, like, he was the person that was looking at the monster every single time, and that's what he drew, was something different.
Yeah, and I think there were definitely supposed to be, like, a lot of them. So,
Maybe so.
yeah. But I think that they, I think that the wind or the moving leaves was just because they needed a way of visually showing where they were.
Without actually showing the monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Or that was lazy directing. Like, we can't really think of a scary enough monster.
Well, or except somehow, like if you're in a car, the monster makes shadows. But
Yeah. The other question I had was, why didn't they leverage the birds more? So they had the bird box, which the movie was all about the bird box, except the birds really didn't play that big of a role.
no, the most impressive thing the birds did was stay alive in that
Small box. That would have killed the birds.
when in the water.
Yeah.
But then
It must have been
they survived
winter
the
or something.
freezer. I mean, yeah. They've been through a lot. But yeah, I did feel like
Like, they could have took off their, blindfolds
if the birds
weren't going crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, that was actually something I was planning on asking Bryce about. So
okay, maybe he figured something out.
yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's all my questions.
So I have one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So a few nights ago, we were in downtown Austin, and we stood in line to go to the Bird Box Experience.
For like 30 minutes.
It wasn't that long.
I think it was.
It was early. There weren't that many people out, but it was like this truck. It was like a big, almost like a small RV.
It looked like one of those city buses. Hop on, off bus.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Like the
about
size
yeah.
of the truck.
And on the inside, it was kind of like a long room, but with benches on either side. And it was being advertised as the Bird Box Experience, and they had a couple of big TVs set up outside and like a big display that you could take pictures in front of. And
They were handing out blindfolds.
yeah, and you had to like sign
A waiver.
to go into it and everything. And so we waited and we went in, and Bryce and I will talk more about the details of this. But if you had to wrap up the Bird Box Experience truck in one word, what would that be?
A disappointment.
I like that we waited in line like 5 times longer than we spent inside the truck.
Yeah.
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 It was not the best.
Short story, don't go.
But there were a lot of people that seemed interested in it, and I think that says a lot about how popular this movie is. And I'm kind of surprised by it, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I think there was better movies on Netflix.
Well,
They're advertising very hard for this movie.
they are, yeah. And it seems like it's working. Like, I think I hear about people talking about it a lot, and not just people that are fans of horror movies. So I think that on some level, this movie is connecting with people. I just don't really understand why.
Yeah. And I also thought it was interesting when it said that it was in select theaters, too. So they're obviously trying to show it
Yeah.
on more of just than the platform of Netflix.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.